Okay, good morning and welcome to Iyun with Benzion. Today's daf is Yevamos Vav 106. The Gemara on Vav and Aleph talks about Chalitza Mutas. We've discussed this on Daf and Gimel. I had an answer to Toz's question over there. Go check out the Ashiyar unique answer. The answer to Toz's question. It answers a lot of things. We're not going to focus on answering that question today. We're going to focus on it's a machlokas between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. The same machlokas is recorded in Ksubos stuff Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph 74. What is Chalitza Mutas? The Gemara says Ksheira. The Brayso says Ksheira. What is the case the Brayso is talking? Rish Lakish says talking about where the Dayanim say to the guy, let her take off your shoe, do Chalitza, and that's really doing Yibum. You trick the guy. Rish Lakish says also trick the guy. Right, you say to the guy, she's going to do chalitza and she's going to give you $200 for that. So we pass on Rabbi Yochanan, but Reish Lakish is not valid according to seemingly not valid at all. As Rabbi Yochanan per Rabbi Yochanan's question, he says the price says basically he has to have in mind to do a chalitza. He's doing a yibum. He thinks he's doing yibum. So he thinks he's doing yibum. She doesn't have the right intentions, so therefore it's invalid completely. But the Gemara makes it clear that it's not completely invalid, even according to Rabbi Yochanan. There was the incidents where this happened, where he said, "B'kachata konsa," like Reish Lakish, and then after he did it, in the middle of Akuvav and Aleph, Amalei Hashta Minach Ifsala Chalosa Chalitzamal Yasa. It wasn't completely invalid. It was invalid. It actually was valid to pastor to you. Now you can't do yibum, and presumably also the rest of the brothers can't do yibum. But it doesn't break the kinyan Yisuin, as we were discussing. You have to do an chalitza mal yasa or matir to the shuk. What's the explanation? So we see that it does work partially, even according to Rabbi Yochanan. If you do Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to explain that works entirely to sever the zika completely, and she can marry the shuk. She can marry anybody. If you do chalitza mutas of Reish Lakish, where you say do chalitza v'kachat hakonsa, and really it's like you're doing yibum, that is partially valid. To do partial chalitza, but you have to do another chalitza and a matir to the shuk. What's going on? Why is it halfway effective? Maybe it shouldn't be effective at all. So the idea is that, as we mentioned before, that yibum, in order to effectuate a complete yibum, you need to do a kinyan yibum, a kinyan chalitza. Right? It says in the Torah, Yevamos yavo alav v'lachal isha. You do a kinyan yibum, v'lachal isha, then you do complete nisuin, right, which is a bi'ila. You can do it all in one shot if you do a bi'ila. If you just do a bi'a, you're ma'anis, or you only accomplished kinyan yibum, which you explained in previous shurim is the dinei mamonis, a kinyan mamonis. But when you're kona a woman, this is very interesting that the Gemara says, the Torah says, when it comes to truma, kinyan kaspo, and the Gemara says that's eris in kiddushin. Kinyan kaspo, when you do kiddushin to a woman, she's kinyan kaspo, she's your monetary acquisition. You made a deal with the woman, basically. Right, you've done kiddushin, she's acquired to you. I think there is a ksuva mina eris, and there's certain monetary, like we learned over here, that the kinyan yibum, right, halfway doing a kinyan yibum, if you do a mimer, which is like kiddushin, it would make the kinyane mamon, and maybe you'd be entitled to the yerusha of the deceased brother, and similarly other dina yerusha would apply. We do the halfway, the kinyan yibum, and just like a kinyan kiddushin also. The ksuva mina erish kuva mina erison, and maybe there's a chi of mizonos to feed her, and ma'aseh goes to the husband. It's a financial transaction. But then there's a second stage of nisuin, which is really kinyan aguf. Just like we talk about an eved. When you have an eved, that's kinyan aguf. You own his body. You don't just own his financials, his whatever he's earning. You have a right to enslave the person. Basically, you own his body. You can tell his body what to do. And when you're nisuin, when you have a complete marriage to a woman, I'd like to venture. The Gemara says ishto kegufo in many places regarding mitzvos, that she's a kinyan gufo also. You can make a kinyan gufo on your wife also. It's not just a kinyan mamonis. Kiddushin is a kinyan mamon, or kinyan kaspo. That's by eris, and by nisuin is kinyan guf. And those are the two stages of yibum, right? Kinyan yibum is just like kinyan kiddushin, and then the kinyan nisuin is lachal leisha, a full beila in order to do that. So therefore, over here, even though he thinks it's yibum and really chalitza, according to Reish Lakish, chalitza mutas, it still affects. It severs part of the relationship. I'm going to explain it like this: that um, when it comes to dine maminis, right? There's two types of umdinas. There's two types of umdinas. The situation basically dictates um, what should really go, what people should really be thinking over there. Even though I stipulate one thing, if there's dvarim shbalev v'lev kol adam, everyone knows something. It's common knowledge. There's an umdina the muchach. There's an umdina, right, a situation, a circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence, if it's known to everybody, dvarim shbalev v'lev kol adam. We'll talk about Masechus Kiddushin, but if it's common knowledge, that's 100% true, and that negates even if you didn't think to do that, negates even your private thoughts, your private stipulations. Um, and then there's something where most people think that, but you don't. You don't think that, and you have a right not to think that. For example, that case according to Reish Lakish, where he thinks he's doing yibum, everyone knows the halachas, and he's doing chalitza. So therefore, I'm not going to say it's an umdin the muchach. Everyone knows the halacha according to Reish Lakish that you're doing a chalitza over here. It's a chalitza mutas, so it's a birur. It's a clarification. It's like two edim, but two edim is like 80%, 80 proof. 80 proof, alcohol is 40% alcohol, 80 proof. 80% is better than 70%. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt was 75%. 80% is a proof, and it works for dinei mamanis. Edim works to be motzi mamun, but in order for something to be a complete 100%, it has to be dvarim shbalev v'lev kol adam. And this guy, he thinks he's doing yibum, so it's not effective to sever the kinyan nisuin, the matir to the shuk, right? Because he could do as a yavam, he could do the kinyan nisuin. He has the right to do that. In order to do chalitza, to remove that and to matir her body to be married to somebody else, he has to do a full, and therefore this only works partially for the kinyan yibum, to sever the kinyan yibum, but not to sever the kinyan nisuin. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, right, where he says, I'm going to do chalitza, and I'll give you an exorbitant amount of money, right? Masayim uses a lot of money, right? So everybody knows, and presumably even the man should know that she's just joking around. And even if he thinks that it's true, it's really dvarim shleiv l'chol adam. When you do an unfair business deal, right? When I do a fair business deal, I go on Amazon, I pay a fair price for something. So dvarim shleiv l'chol adam. This is the fair price. I intended to pay this price. When I quote a really high price to somebody, right? You go to these boutique stores and they charge you a fortune for something that's really not worth it. Or any diamond dealer, I don't know how much it's worth. I mean, the what is it called? The markup on certain items are just ridiculous. I went to buy some stones to put in a vase, a tall vase. Paid 7 shekel for a bag of rocks. I mean, the markup is basically 6 agurot and 90 shekel. I mean, it's nothing. A 7 agurot. How much the rocks cost? You take them for free. The markup is crazy. So even though I agreed to the deal, but dvarim shleiv v'lev kol adam is I didn't want that deal. We didn't. When I paid an exorbitant price for something, and everybody knows it's not the fair price, that you could say mashat ani bach, like the Gemara says. I was just joking around with you. Everybody knows that's not the real life. You don't have a common knowledge. This is a business deal. Common knowledge just dictates it's not the business deal, right? So therefore, the whole transaction is invalid. When the guy's crossing, he's running away from jail, and he has a ferry from Alcatraz, and Israel has the ferry across the San Francisco Bay, right? Everyone knows he's not going to pay $100 million or $100,000 for a ferry ride that costs $1. So that's dvarim shleiv l'chol adam. I mean, even the guy who's really taking the money really doesn't believe him. The guy's going to give him the money. It's dvarim shleiv l'chol adam. It's common knowledge, and that's mavatel, still an unfair deal. But if it is a fair deal, and you just want to get out of that, then the deal is already done. That's common knowledge that it's a fair deal. So, and that's why according to Rabbi Yochanan, the chalitza is like share over there, mashat ani ba, because it's not a fair price. So the money is obviously didn't mean to pay the money, and therefore, it's not a deal at all. That will be today's Iyun share. I hope you enjoyed it. See you tomorrow.